This course is primarily concerned with the devotional and karma yogic aspects of life. To me, words are birds. They come and they go, and what I say may not be as important as just the fact that we are together concerned with the Bhagavad Gita. My understanding of what we're doing here is because you are genuinely seeking in the realm of the development of the spirit of your own consciousness. That's what I'm doing here. And when we are gathered together in that way, with trust and with open hearts, a transmission occurs. And that transmission is one which deepens all of our connectedness to the living spirit, to the faith, in the possibility of who we are when we finish being who we thought we were. Now, when I use the word transmission, there is a tendency to think that I am going to transmit something to you, that he will transmit to us. And I would like to read to you a quote from Ramakrishna, which says that rainwater falling upon the roof of a house flows down to the ground, often through spouts shaped grotesquely like a tiger's head. One gets the impression that the water comes from the tiger's mouth, but in reality it descends from the sky. In the same way, the holy teachings that come from the mouths of godly men seem to be uttered by those men themselves, while in reality they proceed from God. In talking with Swami Muktananda, who is a very, very beautiful saint from India, I was expressing to him my feeling of presumption at attempting to teach the Gita. In India, most people are pundits. It's part of the way of life. Most people are great scholars, really, and they have all made extensive studies of the Gita. The Gita is a book which has been commentaried more than any other book in the history of man. And often I've gotten into long philosophical discussions about the Gita with the railway conductor or the sweeper, because in everybody's spare time, or when they're finished with the spare thing of doing their regular work, they're doing the important work, which is studying the Gita or the Ramayana. And so I was telling Swami Muktananda that I thought it was a little presumptuous for me, because I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, and I'm really not a great intellect about the Gita either. And he told me this story. Krishna, as you may or may not know, I'll tell you a little bit about Krishna soon, but Krishna at one stage of his incarnation as an avatar was this beautiful young blue boy. And there was a great student of the Gita, an old man, and his wife, and he was so intent upon studying the Gita that he had stopped doing all of his work. He wouldn't do anything. And they were going without food, and his wife was being very harsh on him, saying, you have a duty to go out and bring his food for the family, at least 1 or 2 meals a day. But he wouldn't listen. He'd just go off into the woods and study the Gita. And she kept pressing him and hounding and hounding and pressing. And she was making his life quite difficult, but he would escape to the woods to study the Gita every day. She screaming at him as he left. And this one day he went out into the woods and he sat studying the Gita, and he came across a line in the Gita which said, if you offer all of your devotion to me, says Krishna, you need worry about nothing in the world. It'll all be taken care of. And he thought, well, isn't that a peculiar line? I mean, here I'm totally devoted to the Gita, to Krishna, and here's my wife all freaked. Yet it says right here that if I am devoted to the Gita, everything will be taken care of. Why isn't everything being taken care of? Okay. Okay. At which point he underlined that sentence because he wasn't sure about it. At that moment, back at his house, there was a knock at the door, and the wife went to the door, and there was a young man standing there with bags of rice and dal, lentils, and flour, long supply for many months. And the wife said, what are you doing? What is this? He said, this is for the family of somebody who studies the Gita. And he brought in these big bags of food, and she noticed as he was setting them down that on his chest, his shirt was open, and there was a wound on his chest, and there was blood coming out of the wound. And she said to him, what happened to you? And he said, oh, this was done to me. She said, who did this to you? He said, this was done to me by a man studying the Gita out in the woods. And he said no more, and he left. Husband came back, and he saw the food, and he asked his wife about it. And she said, but you know, she said this peculiar thing. She said, when I looked at him, there was blood coming out of this wound in his chest. And when we asked him what the wound was about, he said, it was done by a man studying the Gita out in the woods. And at this point, the old man realized what had happened, and he passed out. He fainted. And Swami Muktananda said to me, you see, when the man had underlined, with doubt, the doubt had been the wound in Krishna. Swami Muktananda said, you see, the Gita isn't a book about Krishna. The Gita is Krishna. Gita is Krishna. And he said, you don't have to worry about teaching the Gita. That's none of your business. The Gita will teach itself. You know, Krishna will do it in spite of you. I think, and the most profound reason is because of my guru. If there are two books which most characterize the quality of the transmission that I received from Maharaji, from my guru, who's now left his body, those two books are the Ramayana, Tulsidasa's Ramayana, and the Bhagavad Gita. Part of my way of sharing with other people the grace of whatever happened to me in relation to this being in India is by using vehicles like the Gita and the Ramayana. Because although Maharaji never talked to me specifically, or maybe once or twice, about the Gita, when I study the Gita and look at the things he said to me, they always turn out to be the same stuff. So I can feel the parallels there. And the other part of teaching the Gita is the honoring of a tradition. That I come out of the West as an intellectual, social, political Jew, and I go to India, and through a tradition, taken into a temple, and through puja and kirtan and mantra and Guru Kripa and the satsang, I am opened to a great extent through this vehicle of this tradition. That opening in that tradition opens me in a way where then the next thing I start to study is the New Testament, which I never read, being a good Jew. And as I read the New Testament, I suddenly meet the living Christ. And now slowly, you always come back to the original place last, perhaps. I'm beginning to get the joy and beauty out of the Chassid tradition, Judaism. There are a number of stages in the evolution of consciousness, a number of stages in the awakening process. Some of these stages are characterized in the Gita as you trace Arjuna's awakening through the 18 chapters. First there's despair, and then there's a possibility, and then there's a beginning of awakening, and then comes chapters 7 through 12, which are primarily the opening of the mystic vision and the deepening of the direct experience, and then comes the last part, which is when the faith is strong and the laying on of the heavy wisdom. That's the way that's spelled out in the Gita. We are representing in this group of people a variety of levels of consciousness, who you and I are. Some of us are just beginning to feel a little bit of malaise, a little bit of discomfort with the way the game's been going in life. And in the other end, some of you are so drunk with bliss of mystic vision that it's everything you can do to stay here and not go off into a cave. And people have to force you to eat, because all worldly desire has fallen away. Some of you laugh cynically, some of you laugh knowingly, see? That's differences in the stage. I'm going to read you a series of quotations about stages so you can get a feeling of what the range of the dance is. This is Jacob Boehme, the Christian mystic. The external world or the external life is not a valley of suffering for those who enjoy it. but only for those who know of a higher life. The animal enjoys animal life. The intellect, the intellectual realm. But he who has entered into regeneration recognizes his terrestrial existence as a burden and a prison. With this recognition, he takes upon himself the cross of Christ. Now, you can say, well, it's not all burden and prison. And whatever you answer to that, you're answering from where you are sitting. So if you don't judge, just listen and hear these all as a kind of a cut-up of stages. Matthew 13, for this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which you see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which you hear, and have not heard them. Uspensky, a student of Gurdjieff. But I had an inner conviction that something had already changed in me, and that now everything would go differently. Recognize that one? This is a nice one about Gurdjieff and Uspensky. Our friends found us becoming dull. Gurdjieff said, there is worse to come. He is an interesting man who lies well. You've already begun to die. It is a long way yet to complete death, but still a certain amount of silliness is going out of you. You can no longer deceive yourselves as sincerely as you did before. You have now got the taste of truth. That one we recognize. The line, you can no longer deceive yourself as sincerely as you did before. That word sincerely is just so essence. It's just how sincere we've been in our deception, in our self-righteousness. Ramakrishna, the nearer you come to God, the less are you disposed to question and reason. When you come up to him, when you behold him as the reality, then all noise, all disputations are at an end. Then it's time for sleep, for the enjoyment which comes in samadhi, in which one is in a state of communion with the blessed vision divine. A Zen statement. When an ordinary man attains knowledge, he is a sage. When a sage attains understanding, he is an ordinary man. So that when we finish this entire journey, we will then fully be the statement of nothing special. It's very reassuring, isn't it? Kabir. Dancing is not for me anymore. The mind no longer plays the tune. What was empty is now full. The vessel of desires is broken. The gown of desire has become frayed. All illusions are gone. Parts enough have I played. I can act no more. Friends and companions have all forsaken me. The restless ones are steady at last. All disputes are settled. Kabir says, by Ram's grace, he has found his full reward. Thomas Merton. As soon as a man is fully disposed to be alone with God, he is alone with God no matter where he may be. In the country, the monastery, the woods, or the city. The lightning flashes from east to west, illuminating the whole horizon and striking where it pleases. And at the same instant, the infinite liberty of God flashes in the depths of that man's soul, and he is illumined. At that moment, he sees that though he seems to be in the middle of his journey, he has already arrived at the end. For the life of grace on earth is the beginning of the life of glory. Although he is a traveler in time, he has opened his eyes for a moment in eternity. And though some of that may be said in a way that's difficult for us to hear just yet, for example, the life of grace on earth is the beginning of the life of glory. May I say that perhaps by the end of the course, if not now, you will recognize that you are primarily no longer existing with your basic identification on the plane of reality that you started out with. That you are already a novice or a participant in another realm or loka or plane of consciousness that becomes more real than the one you left behind. It, of course, will turn out to be an illusion too, but that will come in due time. And these are some instructions to you from Chuang Tzu about this course. Pass directly. Don't listen with your ears. Listen with your mind. No, don't listen with your mind. Listen with your spirit. Listening stops with the ears. The mind stops with recognition. But the spirit is empty and waits on all things. And the way gathers in emptiness alone. Emptiness is the fasting of the mind. It's easy to keep from walking. The hard thing is to walk without touching the ground.